name is Joey, Lost Knowledge. This presentation is what Dungeons and Dragons taught me about InfoSec. So I start out every slide with pictures that just kind of try to describe me. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. It's great. So just a little bit of background. I'm really a 12-year-old stuck in a 32-year-old man's body. I like Legos. I like Star Wars. I like science fiction, Star Trek. I like bourbon. Yes, bourbon. I like good cigars. So in addition to having a really good love of bourbon, I also put on an event at Derby County every year called Bourbon Con. We've done the last couple of years at the Golf House on Friday night. So it's how much I like it. Can't do a D&D talk without giving something to describe myself in D&D terms. Though I do believe my alignment's starting to shift a little bit, I kind of tend to mostly fall towards chaotic neutral. In the end, it's more about me. I'm allowed to be self-portrayed. So disclaimers. I actually do think I got a talking to once about one of my presentations, and that's how this wound up in here. So all views and opinions in this presentation are my own and do not reflect the opinions or beliefs of my employer or any other affiliated organizations. So don't write angry letters to them or anything. I like it. It feeds me. So what is Dungeons and Dragons? If you've never played, actually, I forgot to ask that question. How many in the room have actually played Dungeons and Dragons before? All right, good.
You're at a hacker.
So I originally gave this presentation. I thought the Venn diagram of like Dungeons and Dragons players and like D&D players would be like very like thought. Oh, it must almost be the same circle. No, actually. I think the first time I did the presentation, 2 people in the room actually answered that as an affirmative on a room of like 20, 30 some odd people. So I was a little surprised. But, you know, it's a standard role-playing game. You know, before we had computers, you know, role-playing games weren't World of Warcraft. They were, you know, dices, character sheets, lots of rule books. And all these things came together in little adventures. As with most of my presentations, I enjoy searching the internet for things. Safe search being an optional function of that. So I always like this slide. It's kind of what people actually think of Dungeons and Dragons, the people who play it. You know, it's. I think it's very true. I think it speaks a little bit to the mentality of some of the people, but also to the way that people are perceived. You know, people were. I think this even kind of harkens to a point that Space Rover was talking about earlier today in his talk. He was talking about this perception. You know, he had the quotes from the FBI director and from the head of the Air Force Cyber Command, basically talking about, you know, they very much hinted at these stereotypes of hackers and of IT professionals in general, I think, and so you know, you see a lot of that here in the way people have perceptions. So the first lesson that I kind of take out of Dungeons and Dragons is that it takes a team. You know, and by that, in Dungeons and Dragons, you have your characters. And the important thing to take away from this is if you've never, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or modern RPGs like World of Warcraft, you know, PC-based systems, they all have similar constructs, and that's because most of them, in the end, they're somewhat based on Dungeons and Dragons. So all those games have different races. Races have different skills and abilities and different traits. They all have different classes, which have different skill sets, right? You know, you have combat and physical characters like barbarians and fighters who get in there and beat the crap out of everything. And you have magic users who stand in the back and cast spells and heal people. And so you have these different classes that kind of come together to make a cohesive team because, you know, one person alone can't necessarily do everything. So whether it's, you know, Dungeons and Dragons and you're going into a dungeon, you know, you've got your dungeon master there leading the story, or, you know, you're playing modern role-playing games and you've got dungeons and raids and all these other things, you know, you can't go in there by yourself. You need to have a team of people. The skills come together to make you stronger than you actually are. Again, searching the internet way too much. I actually did find a picture where somebody had kind of explained the classes within Dungeons and Dragons using the Avengers. So what are classes in InfoSec? So I kind of tried to break this up, kind of give a high-level view of a couple of what I will call classes. But it's not, strictly speaking, all of them, right? You're going to have developers, guys who are great at code, who build the programs that you're using, who maybe build the exploits that you're using if you're doing pen testing, writing the scripts that you use for automation, whatever else they might be doing. You've got your Metasploit masters, you've got your pen test teams, you have your guys who go in, who do your testing, and whose skill sets are very driven behind those tools and those functions. You have hardware guys, right? You have guys who know the ins and outs of electronics, who know how to configure and maintain the computer systems. The most abstract one I have up here is the network gurus. Guys who know Wireshark, who know Nmap, guys who can look at a PCAP and can figure out exactly what's going on without any tool except Wireshark and a couple filters. They're like, this is exactly what's happening. There's dozens of tools out there that automate lots of that, right? You can ingest all these PCAPs and it'll show you pretty pictures and data flows, but in the end, those things, nothing's perfect. You still have those guys who can just do that. And then you have OS guys, right? Whether that's desktop server-based OS folks or mobile guys. And a lot of times these are overlapped with other areas, right? Because your developers, odds are, going to have some specialty in one or more of the operating systems. Because anymore, with all these mobile constrained architectures, developing is more restrictive than just writing, hey, I wrote ANSI C code that will compile on any system and it should work. So the second it got that difficult, it became more fun. So in Dungeons and Dragons, there's this concept of multi-class. In the real world, we call it the jack of all trades, but it's very, it's this idea of, somebody who's good at multiple things. There's the saying, jack of all trades, master of none. I tend to disagree somewhat with that. I think you can have somebody who has a broad range, and he's maybe not good at all of the skills, but he might be excellent at networking, but when it comes to, he might know nothing about hardware, but he could be, a good dev, or just have, general skills in other areas that may be useful. Another portion of Dungeons and Dragons is alignments. And the first time I did this presentation, I got really bogged down into the alignments, and the second time I did it, I got even further bogged down into it because this was one of the questions I got asked was, well, I don't understand the alignments. And then I realized something important, at least from the perspective of this presentation, which is, it doesn't matter. There's a couple slides I have here that are, seriously?
Sorry, I'm like, hey, it's on.
So the important thing here, with all these, isn't so much to get bogged down in the wherewithals and how-tos of how characters and classes and alignments work within Dungeons and Dragons. But the thing I think that is most important, and what I'm trying to get across, is that it takes a mix of all of these things, right? So you can apply, to some extent, people into different areas and alignments. And you have to have that, right? In the end, you need different personalities on a team. If everybody's the exact same and thinks the exact same way and has that same mentality, you don't have somebody who, you may not necessarily have that person who can look at this from a different perspective and be like, oh wait, why are we still doing this the same way? If we did, something else, maybe it would work better. So I did leave this one extra slide about alignments to kind of clarify for anybody who really does care. Explaining the good versus evil. That one's pretty clear. Most people get the concept. Caring and concern for others, protecting the innocent, all that fun stuff. Whereas evil wants to kill everything and everyone, or take over the world. Lawful and chaotic always gets a little more confusing for folks. So I left this in. But the lawful side, rules, order, tradition. I try to explain the lawful evil because people are like, well, how can you be lawful and evil? And the best way to describe it is the world dominator, the person who has this moral code and structure but it may be different from everybody else's, but he wants to impose it on everyone, right? He wants the world in kind of his vision, whereas the chaotic evil individual is the world destroyer, right? You don't care. Kind of one of the better examples for chaotic evil is anyone who saw The Dark Knight. The portrayal of the Joker in that movie is pretty spot on for chaotic evil. And so, what did I do? I had to make a version of this that has alignments in InfoSec. So, I tried to break it down a little bit. The good on the top, and because of some of my background, I might be a little biased, but it's basically all your different types of testing teams, right? So, CNA, your certification guys, they're going to be lawful good, right? They have a set of rules. They want to follow those rules and make sure everything gets checked off and everything's done right. If it meets those rules, they're not, they're just like, okay, this is good, this is good, this is good. It all looks good. There you go. Neutral good, I kind of put blue teams there. And the reason I put that there was they're not quite following the rule of doing CNA work, but on the same side, they're not where I think the red teams are, which is when you have a red team who's doing a true penetration test, they need to be looking at your networks in the same methods and ways that your black hats and your white hats are going to, particularly your black hats, your main adversaries are going to attack your network, right? So they have to be more on the chaotic side. And in the end, within your organization, within your groups, those are always going to be perceived as the good, right? They're the ones trying to make better. Some of your admins and your help desk folks are probably going to see them as evil because they come in, break everything, and now they get stuff fixing it, right? Lawful neutral, the Lego blocks are developers because I couldn't find another good picture for a developer. The help desk is true neutral, white hats, chaotic neutral. The bottom, the lawful evil, those are the bosses, right? They have the rule, they have the order, but ultimately they sometimes get in the way, right? I put neutral evil as the lawyers. You would think they'd be the lawful evil, but to them it's more about keeping the company, keeping your butt out of jail and out of trouble than it is anything else. And the chaotic evil is the black hats. These are the guys who, in the end, want to break into your networks. They're the ones who want to, steal information. They want to deface your websites, whatever nefarious reason they might have. Whether it's just for the giggles or for the lulz. That's ultimately those are your enemies, I suppose. So the second lesson I have to go. You need a good director. And this is where the Dungeon Master comes in. So for those who haven't played before, the Dungeon Master is the one who's created the scenarios that you're playing in, who's depending on how evil he is, I've had some whose main purpose in life is to make sure you all die. Others want to see you progress and then kill you. So it's really, this is what's behind that little screen. It's all the scheming, all the plans. And I think that's the important thing, right? This is the person who has the plan and has the vision of what needs to be done. And a lot of times, the other side, it's the players, the ones actually playing the game, whose job it is to actually execute it, right? In the end, how many of us have managers who are actually doing the day-to-day technical? I know there are some, but it's not all. It's leading the way, herding cats. It's quite the reality. I'm in my second run around as a manager, and trying to get everybody in the same place at the same time to do the same thing or even something similar to the same thing is very hard, right? If you've hung out with people at hacker conferences, it's, again, very similar, right? How do you get everybody moving in the same direction at the same time?
Fire drill.
Yeah. Even then, I'm pretty sure if you pulled the fire alarm right now, there'd be a couple hackers looking around like, I don't smell. I don't smell smoke. Yeah, okay, we're good. Yeah. Let's go with that.
They left me my new laptop.
I will admit to coming up this time, I don't know if you noticed by the elevator, there's these stacks of recycling bins. The top one has a cell phone on it. There are no cell phones in it right now. I was a little sad. I was hoping somebody might be dumb enough to leave a cell phone in there. Then I was going to change the whole direction of the talk. We're going to talk about why you don't leave cell phones. So we have many dungeon masters, right? People will dictate what we're doing, dictate the story to us, how things are going to be done. Whether it's our customers, whether it's customers external to your company, if you're doing consulting, if you're doing IT support and internal support for your own company, right? Then the other people at your company are your customers. Your team leads, your technical team leads, your troop supervisors, even upper management. Because in the end, as you go up, how much vision they have specifically for you narrows, but their vision overall fits in. So at the upper management level, there's the global, I have this is what the company needs to do. And the supervisors below that all say, okay, well, to make this happen, for my group, we need to do this. And so then that leads down to you. And if you have team leads between you and a manager, they filter out and they delegate tasks. They're the ones that keep us truly on track, then, right? So all these people kind of dictate the story to us. They're the ones who lead. And if you didn't have this sort of structure, right, then you put 100 guys in a room and try to convince them to all go in one direction. Are they going to go there? Without somebody truly to step up and lead, the odds of them all walking in the same direction are going to be slim to none, or at least in the same general direction. So we get on to the third lesson. And this kind of grows out of, again, me Googling and searching on the internet way too much. So every network is a dungeon, right? I did not have to fabricate these pictures in any way, shape, or form, but I thought they looked incredibly similar to the fact that one is a network diagram and one is a dungeon map. It shows kind of it's a little bit, it is a bit too literal in some sense, but it's kind of a fun diagram to look at. But the reality is, when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you navigate a dungeon, you go in as a team, you're looking around to find, treasures or save the princess, even though she's in her own castle. And you go through, I got you to laugh. You go through, and ultimately you're trying to get to your end goal, right? Whatever that is, it varies, but you navigate through from point to point. We do the same thing in networks, right? If you're coming in as a pen tester and you're looking at a network, you're doing the exact same thing. If your end goal is to get back where all the data is stored, you're going to navigate through in whichever method's most effective. Sometimes you can walk straight in because there's a giant hole in the wall instead of a door. And other times you have to work a little harder at it. And so that's where the first thing comes in, obstacles. When you go into a dungeon in D&D, you have things that are going to be in your way. They might be doors, they could be walls, they could be traps. We have the same thing in networks, right? We have firewalls, we have, different types of appliances that are all doing the same thing. And to some extent, you can even argue that, while not necessarily directly a strict obstacle, if they're set to block traffic, IDSs and IPSs can become the exact same thing, right? So how do we dodge obstacles? Well, if it's a door in Dungeons and Dragons, you have a rogue who comes and picks it lock, right? He gets you through, and now you're on to the next stage. When you're looking at a network, if you're trying to attack it, trying to get into a network from the outside, you might be looking for places and different points to where you have to pivot in from, I got one machine and now I need to try to use that to get from where I'm going. So it's not necessarily a straight A to B. And so, we work around obstacles, right? And sometimes you might just turn them off if you can. If you don't have a rogue to pick a lock, you throw a barbarian at the door until it falls open. Which comes to traps. whether it's the Indiana Jones style giant golden ball, or it's honeypots or other defensive mechanisms designed to lure you away from your ultimate target. It's all ways to try to capture your attention and keep you from getting to where you want to go. In the end, I guess they're just other forms of obstacles. Sometimes you just have to run away. There's creatures, right? In a good dungeon, you have different types of creatures. If you've never played D&D, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, within the various books and rule guides. And then your dungeon master can also be evil, wicked, and come up with his own shit. Excuse me. Whether it's little innocent-looking kobolds or skeletons or the ferocious dragon, you have different things. You have different creatures again, who are always occupying it in your way. So I tried to create some creatures of InfoSec, and this is where you have your IDS, your IPSs, your antivirus, your seams, anything doing log collection, any of those sorts of things that are monitoring and watching the network. That they may not necessarily, unlike the creatures in a dungeon, which could actually literally kill you. More times than not, these are going to just alert you to the fact that somebody's there, and somebody else is going to come in and kill you afterwards. But in the end, all these pieces come together, and so you get this view where you're trying to get to a goal, and that goal is your treasure, right? So in a network, this treasure could be anything, right? If the main person who's going to be attacking your network is people who just wanted to face your website, maybe the goal is just your web server. If you actually have real proprietary data or personal information within the network that people might want, then that probably becomes the treasure. In Dungeons and Dragons, it's always it's almost always just gold and armor and same sort of stuff you'd find in any role-playing game. Right? In the end, your goal is to get something. Sometimes there might be more altruistic methods. You might be trying to save a village, but you kill the dragon, and usually that has a side effect of coming with lots of gold. So the fourth lesson, using your imagination or playing the game, right? Here's this map again. How do you go from pieces of paper and little markers on there to seeing your team and seeing your group come together and destroy a dragon? Well, we have to use our imagination, right? If you don't have any imagination, then Dungeons and Dragons isn't going to be much fun. So what's the reality of computers? And I hate the very cliche image, but it's there. When we interact with computer systems and electronics in general, we have some sort of human usable interface, right? But the reality is that human usable interface is just a cover for what's actually going on underneath. And this goes all the way down to both working on computer systems to looking at network and traffic data. My background, college was in networking, and I think I'm probably one of the few people who actually likes looking at network traffic at the data link layer, going all the way down and looking at increment frames and curse you double E. But the reality is even that's not everything, right? I mean, the reality is the physical layer, depending on which media you're using, that signal is sent in one of various methods, right? Over Ethernet, the voltages along the wire are modulated to represent bits. Over wireless, the signals are changed amplitudes and frequencies in order to accommodate the same concept, right? So we have to, in some ways, abstract this because it's not something we can work with. So this also leads to solving problems. Just two pictures again. I love Googling. So the keyboard not found, press F1 to resume, or using 6 different adapters so that you can put your micro SD card into a computer system and read it out. But ultimately, when you're doing Dungeons and Dragons, whether you're running into a trap or you run into a wall or something gets in your way that keeps you from going where you're going, when we have in InfoSec, we have problems we have to solve, right? Things don't always work the way they're supposed to. It's one of those oddball little things that drives most of us nuts, I'm sure. Which kind of feeds us nicely into lesson 5, which is the elements of chance. Nothing ever goes the way you expect it to. I think anybody who's ever worked with a computer is well aware that even some of us who are really experts every once in a while fix something by magic, right? We don't know why it wasn't working 5 minutes ago, but I just did X and now it works again. So in Dungeons and Dragons, as I kind of showed at the beginning, one of the elements was all the dice sitting on the table. So everything in the game is based on this system of chance. You have a character sheet that has certain stats and points in it, but in the end, in order for you to do anything, you have to pick up one of these dice and roll it. And if it's a bad night, cursing the whole time. So again, more great pictures. In Dungeons and Dragons, the dice have the ultimate control. When you're doing character creation, you roll the dice to get your stat points. When you go into combat, when you perform any actions, you roll the dice to see if you hit what you're going to hit. When you go to hit something, you roll your damage, and there's nothing more frustrating than having the big hulking barbarian swing and miss and roll a 1 and then chop the head off of his front. In InfoSec, it's the same way, right? We have devices that break, we have equipment that won't work. There'll be code that doesn't compile, an exploit that won't run, a blue screen that will blue screen. Whatever it is, we run into these problems, right? So it's always not clear cut. Sure, 90% of the time you might go in and run the same 5 commands on every computer and it's going to work perfectly. But, the next week you go back and you do it and it could be, you did it one day, patch Tuesday came around, you come back the next week and, something's not working again. It's always fun to try to figure out what works. And then there's just Murphy's Law. Anything that can possibly go wrong will. There's plenty of lists on the internet of Murphy's Laws of combat and Dungeons and Dragons and everything else, and there's probably 10 times as many for Murphy's Laws of computing. Apparently some very angry sysadmins exist out there who have nothing to do in their free time except write lists. Let's hope they don't have lists of names. So the summer. Let's basically really get through my best if you did. So there's 5 lessons, right? It takes a team, having a group of people who can work together and who have different skills, who can come together and together be better than they would be as individuals. The funny thing about it takes a team is I probably took a lot longer in life to learn that one than I should have. I'll be the first to admit that up until probably about
5 years ago?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for keeping me honest.
Got married, probably.
Yeah, that would be about right. Until about 5 years ago, more times than not, my mentality was I can do it faster for myself with less people to get in my way. And I probably messed up some crap along the way. But you need a director, you need somebody to keep you straight and going in the right direction. Every network is a dungeon. You have to use your imagination. As I learn every day, nothing ever goes the way you expect it to. That's just the harsh reality of things. So I put up a thank you slide. I added this because I failed to do this with every other time of the other times I've done this presentation this year. So this is going to be the big retirement of this presentation. It kind of makes me hurt that I gave it 4 times. But much like Spaceworks said this morning, how I've Janice came up and asked him at DerbyCon to submit a talk. I got it too, but it definitely felt a little threatening. I'm not saying she threatened me in harm, but it definitely was kind of like, yeah, you should really submit because not everybody goes to every conference. And she's like, I'm sitting down and she's standing up, which is the only way she can be looking down at me. And it was a little intimidating. That's all I'm going to say. But I would like to thank BSides Delaware for having me here. Second year in a row to present, and I'd like to think I actually taught somebody something this year. Last year, I think I just tried to anger people and get them out of the room. Think DerbyCon, Sky.con, Outer Zone. They all allowed me the opportunity to get up here and try to impart some knowledge. Don't know if it was much, but if somebody takes something away, that's better than nothing. A couple more things, and you won't like it, but I'd like to thank Smuggy for all the feedback. Yes, I knew he would do that. For all the feedback, and I'm sure I'll get it again. I'd also like to thank him and Fozzie Hacks for heckling me from the couch at Sky.con. But it was an effective heckling and not mean-spirited, so I appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone who's here today for coming and listening to what I have to say. And anyone else who may be watching who attended my talk earlier in the year and who I failed to thank. Does anyone have any questions? I managed to get through in 30 minutes. I'm sorry.